the spectacular 8th-generation Honda Civic hatchback and a much more relaxed sedan, which were produced from 2006 to 2012, are like half-brothers. Are there any differences in reliability? If hatchbacks according to the passport are entirely English from Swindon, then four doors until 2008 sailed to us straight from their native Japanese islands. And then they began to collect them in the Turkish gebs. Sedans for the Arab countries and the North American market were originally made on the spot, in the UAE and the USA, respectively. Regardless of the place of birth and the number of doors, the paintwork is not very durable. As in the case of the related Honda CR-V, any pebble that has fallen considers it its duty to leave a chip as a keepsake. The sedans of the Turkish assembly of the first years of production were especially distinguished, in which the coating may not hold onto the thresholds in the best way. The metal of their lining itself, by the way, is also rather weak. Do not forget about the modest ground clearance and be careful even when overcoming snowy rifts in winter. Unlike German peers, these older specimens are capable of upsetting with corrosion. In Turkish sedans, with special predilection, you need to inspect not only the rear fenders and the rack near the rear door frame, but also the side members near the attachment of the trailing arms of the rear suspension. And older hatchbacks express solidarity with the swollen paint under the rubber band above the windshield, the agreement to settle corrosion in the joints of the roof and door rolling, and the surrender of the positions of chrome exterior trim elements. In addition, 5 doors are let down by beauty. Sometimes they let water into the trunk through the seal between the spoiler and the glass on the lid. And because of the stingy layer of insulation, the upholstery of the ceiling near the sun visor mounts can become covered with stains from condensation during strong temperature changes in the off-season, and sedans also face the same. The brothers also agree on the weaknesses of windshield wipers, in which not only the exterior with peeling leashes suffers over time, but also functionality. Without care, an oxidized trapezoid can either jam or cause the motor to break. And the mechanism for electric folding mirrors in the same place. When the Civic began to move its ears in different ways, dealers changed the mirror assembly. Fortunately, craftsmen have long mastered the budget repair of a block hidden right in the case with the fuse filled into it. And in general, like a countryman Mitsubishi Lancer X, poor electrical equipment could behave more modestly. Music is often harmful in both versions, but in different ways. On a sedan, it chokes on a CD, and on a hatchback, instead of symbols on the screen, it turns on real light music. Let the radio technicians admire the insides of the audio system even if its backlight goes out, the internal fuse on the circuit board is to blame. After 5 years, the air conditioning compressor clutch relay equally often fails and the power window motor may go on strike. Regular cleaning and sprinkling of the guides with silicone grease will help extend its life. But the stove motor on the 5-door decided to stand out. Unlike the sedan, here the linkers placed it not horizontally, but vertically, and due to uneven radial load, the bushings began to break after 5 to 7 years. It is better to deal with the swarm of bees that have settled in the panel immediately. They won't bite, but the jammed motor will also burn the speed controller. It is even less pleasant if Civic ceases to recognize the owner, more precisely, the key with which the immobilizer ceases to be friends. But to freely enter the salon is still half the battle. After 3 to 5 years, the larva may wear out at the lock, and the key simply cannot be turned. Those who were in time changed the lock under warranty along with the immobilizer unit. Please note, the first, even light, biting of the lock when the ignition is turned on should alert. This is a signal that you need to change the key to a less worn spare, and go look for craftsmen who can sort out the larvae. And carefully monitor the condition of the ground contacts of the battery and the body under the hood that are prone to oxidize. Their poor conductivity leads to many troubles, from central locking failures to glitches in the dashboard and music block. Fortunately, Honda has not forgotten how to make reliable inline fours. With Honda's debut diesel 2.2, Accord received it first in 2004. We have only rare immigrants from Europe. It's a pity. As on the CR-V crossover, the motor does not cause any particular problems. Good in our official petrol monopoly, 88% of cars debuted together with the 8 Civic in 2006 on the Russian market. The 1.8 engine of the R18 series with the IVTEC gas distribution system. The chain and the timing drive clearly demonstrates to German engine builders that you can retire with the engine itself, not earlier than after a respectable 300 to 350,000 kilometers. Of course, if you do not experiment with oil, do not forget that Honda has always preferred its own menu for centuries. In which, by the way, Among the expensive branded liquids, only gasoline is not listed. And besides, the motor is very picky. In case of errors in the diet, it pays not only with injectors and sensitive oxygen sensors, but also with a converter that cannot withstand its usual 150 to 180,000 kilometers. So every 90,000 kilometers, do not forget to change the fuel filter hidden together with the pump in the tank. And check the iridium spark plugs at every service, changing suspicious ones immediately, and not after 100,000 kilometers, as prescribed. By the same token, by the way, you will also ensure individual ignition coils that are sensitive to the state of the candles against failures. Also know that a motor with a collector close to the cylinder head is oh so hot. The hardest part of all is its share on pre-styling hatchbacks older than 2008 with their deaf physiognomy. Then the designers had to give in to the engineers and cut slots in the continuous chandelier between the headlights. In order not to bring the cylinder head of a light alloy unit to thermal shock and warping, do not be lazy at least once every 2 or 3 years to flush the small cells of the radiator of the cooling system. And make sure that the fan does not fall into a coma. The voice of the worker is clearly distinguishable. The failure of a penny temperature sensor can also lead to an expensive finale. And in a special risk group are sedans of the first, 2008, Turkish assembly with unreliable radiators, many of which had to be replaced under warranty. Listen for extraneous sounds as well. After 60 to 70,000 kilometers, did it rumble on the right? This means that the hour has struck for the rather weak roller of the belt tensioner of mounted units. Do not put off replacement indefinitely. A stuck bearing can add trouble by condemning a support or mounting bolt. Just do not confuse the voice of the video with the characteristic tapping under the valve cover. Without hydraulic compensators, the gaps, especially at the exhaust valves, can go away quite quickly, in just 30 to 45,000 kilometers. And to restore order, you have to manually adjust them in a zigzag style. The adsorber valve taps and is in good condition. And if after 100 to 120,000 kilometers the engine stops making sounds at all, refusing to start, first check the starter solenoid relay. Often, a bulkhead with new grease saves from replacing it. And be careful, the engine has low idle speeds, only 650 RPM, which can cause it to vibrate noticeably at idle. And this generic feature sometimes manages to mask the trouble, the wear of the hydraulic support of the power unit after 100,000 kilometers. By the way, most of the above fully applies to the 2-liter or 20A engine on rare, 1%. Honda Civic Type R Axis, they debuted simultaneously in 2007. It differs from its younger brother 1.8 by a large piston stroke and the presence of a second camshaft, and the addition of balance shafts to the design did not affect its equally enviable reliability. Unless the variable valve timing clutch and the camshafts themselves are even more sensitive to the quality of the oil. Honda's own-made gearboxes are also traditionally not a blunder. As a rule, a 6-speed mechanics, almost a third of cars with both bodies, starts making noise with synchronizers or bearings only from a ruthless attitude. And so worries usually come down to updating the oil, of course, branded Honda MTF3, every 60,000 kilometers. Yes, every 120 to 140,000 kilometers you need to change the clutch. And the classic SPCA/MPCA hydraulic automatic for sedans is one of the most trouble-free among its brethren. Run-in since 2001, the 5-stage shaft non-planetary design regularly serves at least up to 300 or even 400,000 kilometers, provided that the filter and oil are updated, of course, branded with the DW1 index every 45,000 kilometers. It is enough to skip 1 or 2 replacements, and the valve body and solenoids clogged with friction wear products will start with shocks during switching, and end with even more friction production and wear of bushings and bearings. But even this is not a sentence, but an item of repair costs of $700 to $1,000. Living unit. And in the midst of all this idle, bam, robot eye shift. The White Crow on hatchbacks older than 2009 does not raise questions regarding the gear part, because everything is based on the same trouble-free 6-speed mechanics. But its automation only once again confirmed that working a solid robot with one dry clutch is an impossible task even for such transmission gurus as Honda's. Even in a fresh state, the unit does not indulge in a pleasant character. It works slowly, does not always select suitable gears, prevents it from accelerating in time. And with increasing mileage, everything only gets worse. The box is not smart and quick-witted to compensate for clutch wear with settings and correctly determine the setting point. In order to reduce twitchiness, it is advisable to send the electronic control unit to retraining courses every 30,000 kilometers to update the firmware version. So save not only nerves, but also clutch. Without adaptation, it will burn out and will not always reach even 50 to 80,000 kilometers, instead of 100 to 120,000. And sometimes, the robot just does not start the engine. Usually this happens after a run of 140 to 160,000 kilometers, when the brushes of the motor of the clutch electric drive are critically ground. In order not to get into an awkward situation, when a warning appears in the form of a gear symbol on the dashboard, go straight to the service. There may not be a second call. At the same time, check the gear shift actuators. By that time they are also tired. But if the robotic Civic stopped showing signs of life without explanation, it's even better. This means that there is a chance to get off with the fright. The sticky gear selector sensors are to blame, because of which the electronics do not recognize the neutral. Usually it is enough to move the lever to different positions, and the sensors change their minds. And remember that the automation of the robot is sensitive to the voltage in the onboard network. If there is a lack of power, the servos lack the power to shift gears. In general, the shame of the family. It is no wonder that in response to the numerous complaints of workers, the engineers made an obvious decision. During restyling, the robot was retired, and the two-pedal Civic hatchback was boxed unified with the sedan. The three-door Civic Type S that remained with the robot was unlucky. The sedan and hatchback differ in the design of the drive shafts, all the more surprising that for both it is, in fact, the only relatively weak point in the transmission. Crunch and wedging of the internal joints of the right shafts must be expected after 100 to 140,000 kilometers. Whereas the outer CV joints, if anything fails, it's a torn anther. And a little later, in hatchbacks with a manual gearbox, the rumble of the intermediate shaft bearing may also be heard. Electrified steering racks, only American versions were equipped with hydraulics, and both relatives are similar in talent to upset. A rare Civic older than 2009 reached 30 to 60,000 kilometers without a drum roll in the front passenger's feet. Due to the fault of the quickly breaking right polymer bushing, dealers ordered new rails in packs, and some managed to change them entirely 2 or even 3 times free of charge. The Kulibans urgently rushed to invent reinforced bushings, but Honda engineers also took care of the same. After the appearance of the upgraded unit on restyled cars, the storm subsided, and after 60 to 80,000 kilometers, traction and tips were the first to be required in steering. The front suspension has its own common heroes. Of the positive, ball bearings and silent blocks of the front levers, easily taking the bar of 150 to 200,000 kilometers. And bushings with stabilizer struts, capable of exchanging solid 100,000 kilometers for themselves. But if there are clicks when turning the steering wheel, it means that the mud has finished off the support bearings that are not protected from it in the best way. Dealers often updated bearings under warranty with runs of only 50 to 70,000 kilometers, and cleaning and new lubrication will help extend their life at the first slight signs of illness. But the creak in the same situation is a reason to inspect the not very durable upper elastic supports of the racks. For some reason, the right one gives up first. Yes, and wheel bearings could serve longer than 100 to 130,000 kilometers. Leaked front shock absorbers more often, after 40 to 60,000 kilometers, have to be changed on hatchbacks, and for sedans, if you monitor the condition of easily torn anthers, the shock absorbers pull the strap twice as long. But mostly 4 doors with a range of 100,000 kilometers have burst front springs. But even more radical relatives are distinguished by the rear suspension. Sedans with multi-link, especially older than 2010, and there are weak springs. Although they do not burst, even without a heavy load, after 4 or 5 years, the feed sags obscenely. Courageously enduring breakdowns does not make sense. Shock absorbers will quickly fail from blows. But silent blocks are able to withstand more than 250,000 kilometers, although their subsequent revision, together with levers, will cost a tangible $1,200. An amazing thing, but a simple semi-independent beam on hatchbacks is weaker. She has no sedan problems with springs and shock absorbers, for $150 original and from $30 for high-quality substitutes, last longer than the front ones. But silent blocks usually withstand no more than 120,000 kilometers, and sometimes the rubber in the hinge begins to tear after 60 to 70,000 kilometers. The piquancy of the situation is that the simplest products go to the load to the beam itself, you either have to go broke on the entire assembly, or experiment with the non-original at your own peril and risk. And this is not the saddest part. A new beam may be needed even with intact silent blocks, for the designers managed to pile it from such soft metal that it tries to bend into a horseshoe even with a sliding impact on the curb. So checking the angles of the installation of all wheels before buying is a sacred thing. Especially, of course, in the case of the charged Civic Type R hatch. Its beam is absolutely no different from the others.